The rain came down like punishment from the sky, sharp, relentless, almost personal. Midnight was close, but the streets of East Halford were still alive with the murmur of engines, flickering neon signs, and the soft thump of tires slicing through puddles. On the corner of Ashland and Grant, a rusting diner stood like a tired sentinel, its red neon letters buzzing faintly through the storm. Maple and Maine. Inside, Mara James wiped the counter with slow, practiced motions. Her shirt clung to her back with sweat, her dark skin glistening from a 12-hour shift. The diner was empty. It usually was at this hour. Just ghosts, a dishwasher in the back, and Mara holding down the night. She was just about to turn off the lights when something caught her eye. A shape. A boy. Outside, hunched in a battered wheelchair, soaked to the bone, his hair plastered to his pale forehead, his thin jacket no match for the cold. His hands clutched a frayed blanket that looked more like a suggestion of warmth than the real thing. And he was trembling, visibly. Mara dropped the towel and moved. She pushed the glass door open, and the wind slapped her in the face like it had a score to settle. Rain soaked through her shoes in seconds. "Hey," she called gently, crouching beside the boy. "Hey, baby, what are you doing out here all alone?" The boy flinched, but didn't recoil. His eyes, impossibly blue, searched hers like he wasn't sure she was real. "I'm waiting for my dad," he mumbled. His voice barely cut through the storm. Mara scanned the street. Empty, aside from the flickering pawn shop sign across the road and a distant set of taillights disappearing into the haze. "And where is he now?" she asked. The boy shrugged, tightening the blanket around himself like he was trying to disappear. She bit her lip. Too many nights she'd seen this. Too many kids left waiting for someone who wasn't coming. She'd made herself a promise once. If she could help, she would. Always. "Well," she said, smiling softly, "you're not staying out here. Not in this mess. Come on, let's get. You warm?" The boy hesitated just for a second, then nodded. Mara gripped the wheelchair handles and pushed him inside. The blast of warmth from the diner hit them like a welcome. The scent of coffee, bacon grease, and burnt toast wrapped around them like a blanket far better than the one he had. She led him to a booth near the radiator and gently placed a clean towel over his shoulders. She crouched down to eye level and said, "I'm Mara. What's your name, sweetheart?" The boy blinked slowly. "Eli." "That's a strong name," she smiled. "You hungry?" He gave the tiniest nod. Mara didn't need more than that. In the kitchen she moved fast. 2 slices of sourdough, thick slices of cheddar, and tomato soup bubbling on the stove. The same meal her mother used to make when the heat got shut off and the lights were too dim to study by. 10 minutes later, she placed the plate in front of him. The grilled cheese was golden and crisp, the soup steaming gently. "This one's on me," she said, tucking a napkin into his lap. Eli stared at the food like it was treasure. When he took his first bite, his eyes widened in shock and wonder. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted," he whispered. Mara chuckled. Good food makes everything better. But inside she felt the familiar ache, the one that hit whenever. She saw a kid carry too much of the world on their shoulders. Across the street, inside a black SUV with tinted windows, someone was watching. The man sat in silence, broad-shouldered, mid-40s, face carved from marble. His name was Julian Cross, and he was one of the wealthiest men on the East Coast. A silent titan in the tech world, founder of Crosspoint Technologies. A man who built an empire on precision, detachment, and control. The boy eating soup inside the diner was his son. Julian's jaw tightened. He hadn't meant to leave Eli alone this long. An emergency call with the Tokyo office had dragged past its scheduled 10 minutes. He assumed the diner would be a safe enough place to wait. He hadn't expected this woman. Julian reached for his phone. "Nina!" he said when his assistant picked up. "Get down to Maple and Main. Ditch the heels, dress low profile. I want everything on the woman who just fed my son. Name, background, address. Tonight." He hung up. Back inside, Eli was laughing, a real laugh. He kicked his feet under the booth, soup stains on his chin, crumbs on his hands. Mara wiped his mouth gently with a napkin. "Messy eater," she teased. Eli grinned. "You're nice." That made Mara pause. Something in the way he said it, like he wasn't used to it. Her chest tightened. Then the bell above the door jingled. A woman walked in. Jeans, hoodie, ball cap pulled low. She didn't look like a customer. She looked like someone with an objective. Her eyes scanned the room and locked on Eli. "There you are, champ," she said, crouching beside him. "Time to go." Eli hesitated, glancing at Mara. "I didn't finish my milk." "You can take it with you," the woman said. Her tone was easy, too easy. Mara's instincts flared. "Who are you?" she asked, not unkindly. The woman smiled, without warmth. "His aunt." Mara turned to Eli. "That true, baby?" Eli hesitated, just a second too long. The lies settled thick in the air. Still, Mara didn't push. She knew what happened when women like her pushed too hard. She stood, grabbed a chocolate chip cookie, wrapped it in wax paper and handed it to Eli. "For the road," she said. His fingers closed around it, and he looked up at her like she was magic. "Thanks, Mara." "You're the best," Mara forced. A smile. But something didn't sit right. She watched them leave. The tension between the woman and Eli. The way he didn't look back. Outside, the SUV headlights flashed. The rear door swung open before the woman even knocked. Julian Cross stepped out. He didn't speak, just opened the car for his son. As Eli got in, Julian turned to the woman. "Well?" "She's smart," Nina said. "Didn't buy the aunt story, but she let him go." "She had no choice," Nina replied. "Black woman making a scene. She'd be the one in trouble, not me." Julian nodded once. "Get me. Everything on her by morning." The SUV pulled away, disappearing into the storm. Inside the diner, Mara stood still, staring at the empty booth where Eli had been. The cookie crumbs still on the table. She didn't know his last name, but she knew this. That wasn't his aunt. And something was very, very wrong. It was after 2 a.m. when Mara James finally made it home. Her sneakers squelched on the old linoleum. Stairs, each step echoing in the silent, crumbling hallway of her apartment building. The overhead lights flickered like they were trying to quit for the night, just like her. When she reached her door on the 3rd floor, she leaned her forehead against the peeling wood for a moment and sighed. She had barely made enough in tips to cover the gas bill. Again. But it wasn't the money that weighed on her tonight. It was that kid, Eli, his eyes, the way he'd flinched, the tension in his shoulders when that woman appeared, and the lie, soft but unmistakable. She'd seen too much of that world to believe otherwise. When she finally stepped inside, the smell of old paint and barely working heat wrapped around her. She dropped her keys, kicked off her soaked shoes, and leaned against the door, rubbing her temples. "Don't get involved," she told herself. "You know better." But the echo of Eli's voice still clung to her memory. "You're nice." She closed her eyes, then a knock, sharp, direct, too late for neighbors, too precise for strangers. Mara froze. She peered through the peephole. A man in a tailored black coat stood at her door, clean-shaven, calm, but his eyes, those eyes out were cold, scanning everything like he was already 3 steps ahead of her. She didn't open it. "Who is it?" she asked through the wood. A pause. Then, low and composed, "Julian Cross." The name meant nothing to her. "What do you want?" Another pause. "To talk." Every instinct in her screamed, "No." But curiosity is a stubborn thing. Slowly, carefully, she unlatched the door and opened it just enough to see him clearly. He didn't belong in this hallway. He didn't belong in this part of town. He didn't belong anywhere near her world. "I don't know you," she said flatly. His tone didn't waver. "But you know my son." Mara's pulse skipped. She looked at him again, deeper now, at the expensive coat, the watch that probably cost more than her rent, the faint scent of something imported and expensive. "Eli," she said quietly. Julian nodded. "I saw everything. From the car. The way you helped him." Mara's face hardened. "You were across the street, watching. I was on a call. I thought he'd be okay for 10 minutes, and it turned into an hour." Julian didn't flinch. "That's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here exactly?" she said, folding her arms. Julian reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Thick, weighty, too formal to be casual. He placed it on the rickety kitchen table behind. Without asking permission. "I don't believe in charity," he said. "But I do believe in paying my debts." Mara stared at the envelope. "What is that?" "A job offer." She blinked. "Excuse me?" Julian's voice remained steady. "Crosspoint Technologies, 6 figures, full benefits, starting next week." Mara let out a short, humorless laugh. "You think handing me a paycheck erases something? What do you even know about me? I know you showed compassion when no one else would. I know you treated my son like he mattered, not like an inconvenience. That's rare." "Yeah," she said. "Well, I'm not rare. I'm tired. I work 2 shifts. I don't need to be your personal redemption project." Julian didn't argue. He simply said, "This isn't about redemption. It's about capability. I watched the way you moved, how you spoke to him. You understand people. I need that." Mara narrowed her eyes. "Let me guess. You want me to make your empire look more human? That it? You'd be working directly with me. Negotiations, public interface, strategy." She snorted. "You've got a dozen Ivy Leaguers who'd kill for that spot." Julian's voice lowered just a notch. "That's exactly why I don't trust them." Something in her wavered. She looked at the envelope again, felt the weight of her mother's voice in her head. "Don't ever take from a man like that. Nothing's ever free." "What's the catch?" she asked. "You owe me nothing," Julian said simply. "This is about what you can do, and what I know you're capable of." The room went quiet. Mara stared at him. He stared back. Finally, she walked to the table, touched the envelope like it might bite. "I'll think about it." Julian gave a small nod. "Good." Then he turned, stepped back into the hall, and was gone. Mara stood there, the door still open, the storm wind seeping through the crack. The envelope in her hand felt heavier than anything she'd carried all day. She already knew the answer, but she needed the night to pretend she had a choice. 3 days later, Mara James stepped through the gleaming glass doors of Shepkestel, Crosspoint Technologies. Everything smelled like fresh marble and filtered air. A high-gloss lobby stretched around her, all chrome and cold light. Men in sharp suits walked with purpose. Women in heels and pressed blazers tapped quickly across the polished floor. Everyone looked like they belonged to another planet. And Mara. Mara wore a thrift store blazer, pressed with care. Her best shoes, lip balm, not lipstick. She had braided her hair neatly and carried nothing but a worn leather notebook and a borrowed confidence. As soon as she crossed the threshold, heads turned, not because she was late, because she didn't look like she should be there. A receptionist with perfectly symmetrical eyebrows glanced up and blinked twice before gesturing toward the elevators. "Executive level, top floor. Mr. Cross is waiting." The ride-up felt like being slowly swallowed. By the time the elevator doors slid open, Mara had rolled her shoulders 3 times and breathed in 4. Julian's office was massive, floor to ceiling. Windows framed the skyline like it belonged to him. The furniture was so sleek it looked carved from one piece of metal. His desk, dark wood, bare except for a screen and one crystal pen, sat like an altar. Julian didn't look up when she entered. "You're late," he said, not turning. "2 minutes," Mara answered, "which are 2 minutes I don't get back." She didn't apologize. "You want me here or not?" Julian finally looked up. Sharp, unreadable eyes. "That remains to be seen." Before she could respond, the glass door behind her opened. A woman walked in, tall, blonde, a tailored pantsuit that probably cost more than Mara's entire wardrobe. "Nina West," the woman said smoothly, offering a brief, cool smile. "You must be the new wild card." "Mara James," she replied, holding her gaze. "Nice to meet you, Nina." Nina didn't flinch. "I've prepared the briefing for the Orion negotiations." She handed Julian a sleek tablet, barely glancing. "And Mara again. Would you like me to bring Miss James up to speed?" Julian didn't blink. "No, I will." Nina nodded once, then turned, but not before casting Mara one last glance. This time her voice was softer, almost casual. "Good luck." The door clicked shut. Mara let the silence stretch before she spoke. "You bring me into your corporate fortress, and the first thing you do is throw me in a room with the Ice Queen?" Julian leaned back in his chair. "I'm not interested in making you comfortable." "Yeah," she said. "I got that." He slid a file toward her. "Orion Group," he said. "They want to push through a new contract, outsourcing manufacturing. It'll cut costs, but it means laying off over 4,000 domestic employees." Mara opened the file. Her stomach turned. "And what's my job in this mess?" "To stop them." He blinked. "You want me to convince a bunch of billionaires not to fire thousands of people so they can buy bigger yachts?" Julian's voice didn't change. "I want you to do what you did in that diner. Make them listen, make them care." She laughed, short and bitter. "You think I've got magic powers or something?" "No," he said. "I think you've seen things they haven't. I think you speak from a place they can't fake. And I think you're not afraid of them." Mara stared at him. "Why me?" Julian looked her dead in the eye. "Because people who have nothing left to lose fight the hardest." That silenced her. It wasn't a compliment, but it wasn't an insult either. It was truth, and she could work with that. The meeting room was glass-walled and cold, like it was built to keep emotions out. Mara sat beside Julian at the long table as 3 men filed in. All of them wore the same expression. "This isn't a conversation. It's a formality." Philip Langton led the trio. Silver hair, navy suit, smug smile. He barely acknowledged Mara. Julian wasted no time. "You're proposing the transfer of production overseas," he said evenly. "We've reviewed the numbers. You'll save money short-term, but at the cost of domestic trust, loyalty, and long-term brand equity." Langton smiled thinly. "It's not personal, Julian. It's just business." Mara's jaw tightened. She'd heard that line too many times. "It's not personal when your neighborhood loses its grocery store. It's not personal when your mother's job disappears overseas. It's not personal when your rent goes up 40% overnight." Langton turned to her finally. "And you are Mara James," she said calmly, "advisor to Mr. Cross." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course." "Well, Miss James, I'm sure you understand these things come down to efficiency." Mara leaned forward, calm but deadly. "No," she said. "They come down to priorities." Langton raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? You want to talk numbers?" She continued. "Here's what happens when you outsource. Short-term savings, sure. But in 3 years, labor costs overseas rise. You end up restructuring. Again, rehiring, rebranding. You spend millions on PR to undo the damage of abandoning the very people who built your success." She slid a folder across the table. "Independent market analysis," she said. "Don't take my word for it." Langton's face stiffened. His fingers hesitated over the folder. "And that," Mara said, "isn't personal either. It's reality." For a moment, silence. Then Julian added, without looking away from Langton, We'll be expecting your updated position in 48 hours. The room cleared quickly. Langton didn't speak to Mara as he left, but he looked at her, really looked, like someone who realized too late he'd underestimated the wrong person. Back in the office, Julian was quiet. Mara turned to him. "Well?" He didn't smile, but his eyes shifted. "Just slightly. I knew I hired you for a reason." Mara smirked. "Damn right you did." And for the first time since stepping into that building, she felt it. Not welcome, not comfortable, but powerful. "Absolutely. Let's continue with Mara." James was getting used to walking through Crosspoint's glass corridors, like she belonged there, not because anyone made it easy, but because she refused to let anyone believe she didn't. 2 months in, her name carried weight in meeting rooms, not because of her title, strategic liaison to the CEO, but because she delivered results. She closed negotiations others fumbled. She spoke in rooms where her presence was never expected. She said what no one else dared to say. And she won, which is why what happened next made no sense. She was coming back from a client meeting when she saw Nina standing outside her office. Clipboard in hand, lips drawn tight. "We have a problem," Nina said, voice clipped. Mara blinked. "You say that like it's mine." Nina didn't smile. She just handed her a piece of paper. Mara's eyes scanned the printed email. She read it twice. Then again, a sick cold weight settled in her stomach. It was a company report, confidential, sensitive, forwarded to an anonymous press contact from her email, her name, her signature, her ruin. "I didn't send this," Mara said slowly. "I know," Nina said. "But someone wants the board to think you did." Mara looked up sharply. "The board's seen it?" Nina nodded, her heart sank. She could already feel it coming, the whisper campaign, the closed-door meetings, the silent erasure. "You know what this means," she muttered. Nina didn't respond, because they both knew it didn't matter that Mara hadn't sent the email. She was the new hire, the outsider, the black woman who'd risen too fast, spoken too loud, stood too firm. She was the easiest one to blame. Inside Julian's office, the temperature felt 20 degrees colder. He sat behind his desk like stone, eyes unreadable, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Mara dropped the paper in front of him. "This isn't mine." Julian didn't even glance at it. "I want to believe you." The words landed like ice. "But the board is calling for a full review. Our stock's taken a hit. There's talk of breach of contract, SEC audits. You understand how serious this is." "I understand exactly how serious this is," Mara snapped. "I also understand I'm the easiest target in this building." Julian didn't argue. He didn't need to. Mara paced the room, fury and fear colliding in her chest. "You think I did this?" she asked, quieter now. Julian looked at her, hard, but honest. "No," he said. And still, he hadn't defended her to the board. "Not yet, but they do," he added. She closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, there was fire behind her voice. "Then we find who actually did this." Julian raised an eyebrow. "We?" Mara stepped closer. "You hired me because I don't back down. Well, I'm still here, and if someone in this company is trying to bury me," she tapped the paper, "then I'm going to make damn sure they regret it." He didn't speak for a moment. Then he stood, reached for his jacket and said, "Nina's already tracing the email source. It came from an external server. Someone covered their tracks well." She met his gaze. "Then we'll just have to be smarter." Julian nodded. For the first time since she walked into his world, she saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not cold calculation. Conviction. Later that night, the office was mostly dark. Mara sat in the war room beside Nina, coffee cooling untouched beside them, screen light reflecting off their faces. Lines of code, server trails, IP addresses that looped through proxies in other countries. Whoever had done this knew exactly how to hide, but not perfectly. Nina clicked something, then froze. "There," she said. There's a pattern. Mara leaned in. An internal document had been downloaded at a strange time, 3:43 a.m., from a restricted access folder. And the access ID? A Callaway Exec 10. Eric Callaway, 10 years in the company, board favorite, polished, well-spoken, always conveniently uninvolved in controversy. Mara leaned back slowly. Of course, she'd always had a feeling about him. The way he'd smiled too tightly. The way he'd called her Miss James with just a trace of condescension. The way he'd made sure she was always looped in last. Can we prove it? She asked. We don't need to prove it to the FBI, Nina said. Just to Julian and the board. Mara smiled, but it was all teeth. Then let's do it. She wasn't going to wait for someone to give her a defense. She was going to walk into that boardroom and set the record on fire. The next morning, the building buzzed like a hive under threat. Crosspoint's top floor was unusually tense. Elevators arriving slower, assistants typing faster, executives speaking in low, clipped tones, like something dangerous had been let loose, and something had. Mara James. She didn't wait for an invitation. She didn't ask for a meeting. She walked into the boardroom with a folder under her arm and her chin held high, not as a guest, but like someone who knew the walls wouldn't protect the people inside them for much longer. The board members were already seated. Suits and silence. Julian Cross sat at the head of the table, arms folded, eyes unreadable. Eric Callaway was there too. He leaned back in his seat, calm as stone, mouth curled slightly like someone watching a performance he expected to end in disaster. Mara placed the folder down in the center of the table. Her voice didn't shake. I assume I don't need to explain why I'm here. The oldest board member, a thin-lipped man with silver cufflinks and a faint smirk, gestured toward an empty chair. Miss James, please. Let's not be dramatic. She didn't sit. I won't take long, she said, flipping the folder open. What you're looking at is a log of data requests, timestamps, and metadata tied to the leak you thought I caused. No one moved. You'll see that the classified document was accessed from a restricted folder at 3:43 a.m. using an executive-level login. She turned a page, slid it forward. That login belonged to Eric Callaway. A few heads turned. Eric didn't. His jaw flexed once, barely visible. Mara kept going. Following that, the file was routed through a proxy server in Estonia. Convenient, right? Makes it look like an external breach, except whoever did it didn't clear the local cache. Logs. She pointed to a printed record, which we pulled at 5:12 this morning. There's only one person who had access to both the data and the exit channels. She met Eric's gaze directly. You. The room was still, silent. All the oxygen had left it. Eric finally leaned forward, voice smooth and composed. This is nonsense, he said. I don't even know what this is based on. Metadata? Are we really listening to IT speculation now? Mara smiled, a quiet, dangerous smile. Don't worry, legal has the full digital chain. So does compliance. And just to be safe, so does the press. Eric's mouth opened, then closed. The boardroom doors opened a second later. Nina stepped in, tablet in hand, face completely neutral. Julian nodded slightly at her. She connected the tablet to the screen behind him with one click. On the monitor, email chains populated. Login logs, file access histories, server timestamps. Everything. Julian stood slowly, adjusting his jacket cuffs like he was preparing for court. Effective immediately, he said, voice sharp. Eric Callaway is terminated. Full legal proceedings will follow. Eric stood too fast, eyes darting like a cornered animal. This is ridiculous, he barked. I've been here longer than... Julian cut him off with one look. You compromised this company, he said. You used Mara James as a shield. You gambled on this board's bias to cover your tracks. He turned to the room. And you almost got away with it. Eric didn't respond. He just left. No apology, no eye contact. The door slammed behind him. Silence. Mara stood still, chest rising slowly, pulse heavy in her ears. Julian looked at her. "You have something to add?" She scanned the room. Powerful men, powerful titles. All of them had doubted her, dismissed her, almost erased her, and now they were quiet. Now they listened. She said just 5 words. "You picked the wrong woman." Then she turned and walked out. Back in her office, the tension hadn't lifted yet. Nina appeared in the doorway with 2 coffees. Wordlessly, she handed one to Mara and sat across from her. "That was clean," Nina said. "No, it was necessary," Mara replied, then added more softly, "But thanks." Nina hesitated. "I misjudged you," she said finally. "I thought you'd fold." Mara took a slow sip of coffee. "I don't fold." Nina smirked. "Yeah, I see that now." Mara looked out the window, the city blinking far below like a million tiny chances. "You think they'll ever treat me the same after this?" "No," Nina said. "But not because you lost their trust." Mara turned. "Because you made them afraid." That evening, Julian found her in the break room, leaning against the counter, finally breathing like a weight had been lifted. "You should know," he said. "The board is voting to give you full strategic authority over the next Labour initiative." She turned. "Because they trust me now." "Because they can't afford not to." He looked at her a long time, then added, "And because I do." She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. Instead, she asked, "Did you know it was Calloway?" "All along?" Julian shook his head once. "I suspected, but I needed you to prove it." She let the answer hang in the air, part impressed, part furious. "You used me." "I believed in you," he corrected, "and I let you prove me right." She narrowed her eyes. "You always talk like that?" "Only when I mean it," Mara gave a dry laugh. "You're exhausting." Julian smiled for the first time. "But effective, absolutely. Let's continue with 2 weeks had passed since Mara James flipped the boardroom upside down, and yet the ripple hadn't stopped. Inside Crosspoint, a silent reshuffling was underway. Departments reorganized, old guards replaced, trust reevaluated. Mara wasn't just another voice in the room anymore. She was a force. Every meeting she entered got quieter. Every opinion she gave was heard. Still, something lingered beneath the surface. No one said it out loud. But they all thought it. She wasn't supposed to win. And yet she had. Now came the part where she proved it wasn't a fluke. Julian stood beside her on the 30th floor balcony, the skyline of the city stretching out before them like a living organism, loud, alive, and relentless. Langton's team backed down, he said, watching traffic move below. Kept production domestic. The board's pleased. Mara sipped her espresso. "I didn't do it for the board." Julian looked at her. "I know." She turned to face him. "What now?" He paused, then said, "Now we build something better." Mara tilted her head. "You? Building better? That a midlife crisis talking?" He didn't smile, but he didn't disagree either. "I've spent most of my life building things that scale," he said. "Systems, empires, profit margins. But none of that means anything if the people inside them are disposable." Mara studied him. "You're changing." "No," he replied. "I'm listening." 2 days later they sat in front of a new team of investors, this time, to propose a radical shift in Crosspoint's labor strategy, ethical restructuring, domestic reinvestment, living wage guarantees. It was the kind of pitch that would have been laughed out of the room a year ago. Now, Mara stood at the front of the conference room, confident, crisp, and calm. Her voice was steady, her data airtight. She didn't sell a dream. She sold results. She showed them what the numbers could look like when people weren't afterthoughts, but the foundation, and they bought it. Later that night, Julian knocked on her office door. This time, no formality. Just a man walking into a room with someone he respected. "Big day," he said. Mara nodded. Bigger than they realize. Julian placed a thin envelope on her desk. She looked at it. What's this? Promotion. She raised an eyebrow. Already? You've earned it. Vice President of Corporate Strategy. Mara blinked. You're serious. Always. She opened the envelope, scanned the offer. Her heart beat faster, but her face stayed still. This was what she fought for, not the title. Not the office. The authority to make real change. You're not giving me this because you owe me? Julian shook his head. I gave you the opportunity. You made it matter. She leaned back in her chair. You know what they're going to say, she said. That I'm a diversity pick, that I got lucky. Let them. You don't care. He looked at her. I've learned the difference between luck and leverage. Mara nodded slowly, then smirked. You're still exhausting. The following weekend, the sun broke through after 4 days of rain. Mara found herself standing outside a crowded auditorium, dressed casually for once. Jeans, blouse, low heels. Inside, the local charter school was buzzing with excitement. It was graduation day, and at the center of it all was Eli Cross. His chair had been upgraded, sleek, agile, modern. He'd grown a few inches since that rainy night at the diner, but his smile was the same, wide, open, grateful. He spotted her near the front row and lit up like Christmas. Mara! She waved, and he wheeled straight toward her with full speed. Excitement. His hair was neater, but his face still carried 1,000 expressions in a single moment. You came, he said. Of course I came. I said I would. He handed her a wrinkled program. Look, I made the honor roll twice. She scanned the page and laughed. Told you you were a genius. I'm going to college next year. I know. Julian mentioned it. Eli grinned. Are you and my dad friends now? Mara blinked. Define friends. You don't yell at each other as much, Eli said, shrugging. That's a start. She laughed. Julian approached a few moments later, dressed in a crisp navy suit, no tie, less armor than usual. He watched Eli with quiet pride, then turned to Mara. You did good, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Pretty sure it was your DNA. Not what I meant. Their eyes met. There was nothing flirty there, just clarity, respect, the kind that had been earned in battle, not handed over politely. Eli's going to change things, Mara said softly. So are you, Julian replied. Eli grinned between them. This is the part where you hug, right? Julian blinked. Absolutely not. Mara rolled her eyes. God, no! Eli cracked up. Okay, fine. Group photo, though? They posed awkwardly. The three of them, not a family, but not strangers. Either. Something new. Something built. Later that evening, back in her apartment, Mara kicked off her shoes and finally let herself breathe. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Julian. Board voted. Foundation approved. Press release goes. Out Monday, Carter Holt Fund is official. Mara stared at the screen, then replied, Only if I get to name the first building. Julian texted back, Name it whatever you want. You earned that. The auditorium pulsed with nervous excitement. Families squeezed into rows of folding chairs. Teachers in long robes adjusted sashes and sorted clipboards. The sound of names being mispronounced over a crackling mic echoed through the room, but Mara James didn't hear any of it. Not really. Her eyes were locked on the stage, where Eli Cross sat in his sleek silver wheelchair, grinning from ear to ear in his cap and gown. He looked taller somehow. Maybe it was the pride, maybe it was the weight he no longer carried. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer declared, Eli Cross, graduating with honors, recipient of the Carter Holt Community Resilience Scholarship. The crowd erupted in applause. Eli wheeled himself across the stage, arms pumping with excitement, gold tassels swinging. When the principal handed him the diploma, Eli held it up like it was a championship trophy. Mara felt her throat tighten. She didn't cry often, but this was earned. Julian stood beside her, expression calm but focused. Still Julian, still precise. But when Eli glanced into the crowd and found them, his eyes lit up. He didn't wave to his classmates. He didn't wave to the crowd. He waved to them. After the ceremony, in the school courtyard surrounded by balloons and cardboard cutouts of cartoon graduation caps, Eli crashed into Mara with a full-force hug. Okay, easy, she laughed, hugging him back. I don't have spine protection like that chair does. I did it, he said, beaming. You did, she said, brushing a tassel out of his face. And you're not done. I'm going to college, on a scholarship with my name on it. Well, half my name. Mara raised an eyebrow. Carter Holt Resilience Fund. Has a nice ring, doesn't it? Eli nodded. You think I'll be okay out there? You're going to be better than okay. You're going to be the one changing the world, remember? He smiled, but there was a flicker of something, anxiety maybe, behind his eyes. That mix of excitement and fear no diploma could silence. Julian approached quietly. Already networking? Trying, Eli said. She's better at the talking part. Julian looked at Mara. He gets that from you. Mara folded her arms. I think he gets the stubbornness from both of us. They stayed longer than expected. The crowd thinned. The sun dipped low over the rooftops. At one point, Eli rolled off to speak with some classmates, and for the first time all afternoon, Mara and Julian stood alone. Do you think he knows? She asked softly. Julian turned. Knows what? That all of this, she gestured around them, started with a grilled cheese and tomato soup. Julian exhaled, something between a laugh and a sigh. He knows enough. They stood, in there for a long moment, not speaking, just watching Eli laugh with kids who now saw him as more than the boy in the chair. Was it worth it? She asked. All of it? Julian nodded. Every single storm, Mara tilted her head. Even the ones you caused? He smirked. Especially those. She laughed. You're not as cold as you pretend to be. Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation. Later that night, back in her apartment, Mara sat on the edge of her bed, still dressed, diploma program in her lap. She flipped through it absently, pausing on the scholarship section. Carter Holt Resilience Fund. Awarded to students who demonstrate strength in adversity, leadership through empathy, and excellence in action. She swallowed hard. It was just a sentence, but it held years inside it, rain on cracked pavement, a boy in a wheelchair, a sandwich served without a question, a man in a car who saw everything and understood none of it until much later. Mara picked up her phone and texted Julian. Mara, he's going to be okay. Julian, he's more than okay. He's who I want to be when I grow up. She chuckled to herself, then set the phone down and looked out the window. The city was still buzzing, still loud, still unfair. But now it buzzed with something else too. Possibility. 2 weeks later, Mara stood behind a velvet ribbon with a pair of silver ceremonial scissors in her hand. A plaque glinted beside her, sunlight bouncing off the gold. Letters. The Carter Holt Foundation Center for Community Equity and Innovation. Kids lined up behind her, clapping. Community leaders, teachers, neighbors, journalists held cameras steady as she smiled into the lens, heart pounding, not from nerves, but from purpose. Next to her stood Eli, beaming in a new crosspoint hoodie. College orientation was in 3 days. He was ready. Julian stood beside them, saying nothing, just watching. This time, he wasn't the center of anything, Mara was, and Eli. He was proof that a single act of kindness could unravel something far greater than luck or charity. It could become legacy.